So welcome to part 2 of my e.v.a. foam Skyrim iron helmet tutorial. This part deals mostly in the small detail that brings it all together. So you'll be using a lot of the same things as last time. You'll need pins, I finally found mine, some e.v.a. foam, nowhere near as much foam as before though. You might be able to get away with just a scrap piece or two. A utility knife or box cutter or x-acto knife, doesn't really matter as long as it's sharp. A pen, 2 sheets of cardstock, a heat gun, a ruler, and contact cement. Now for the completely new stuff that you'll need just for this part. Craft foam, you can get this stuff from Dollar Tree or Walmart, and you shouldn't need more than 4 of these 5x8 sheets, or 2 of the 8x12 sheets, which should not be more than $3. The color of the foam doesn't matter, just make sure you get the 2mm thick sheets. And we'll be using these to make the horns. Next, you'll need some thumbtacks. You'll only need about 10, and you can get them from Dollar Tree. I found these at Goodwill for $1.50, and I'll be using these instead because they have a cool texture to them, and I couldn't find my regular ones. But you don't need to spend more than $1, and the smooth regular thumbtacks will do. Next, you'll need spray paint, and you'll only really need about 3, but they're very important. You'll need the dark gray plastic dip, very important. This will act as both a primer, hardener, and the base color, so don't skimp out on this. This costs $5 to $6 from Walmart, and it's a must. Next, you'll need a can of super bright metallic spray. I'm using the Krylon Brilliant Silver. You could use any kind as long as it's metallic silver spray paint. I just got the cheapest one. You won't need a lot either. You could easily make 10 helmets with 1 can. And there's a very specific technique you use to apply this. You don't just spray it on directly. Next, you'll need a can of clear coat. Make sure it's gloss or semi-gloss. Don't get matte or satin. This is used to give it all a nice sheen and a final protective coating, and is actually the final step. It costs $5 to $6 as well, and I forgot to mention the metallic spray paint costs $5 to $6 also. And the clear spray here works perfectly fine, though I personally prefer to use fiberglass resin. It costs about $15 and it smells awful, but it provides a thicker, harder protective layer. But this will work just fine. I'm trying to make this tutorial as budget conscious as possible. Next, you'll need scissors. These will be used for cutting out your horn template out of the craft foam, and you'll need a block of floral foam. I got this from Dollar Tree, but you can get it from Walmart. You won't need much, and it should only cost between $1 to $2. This will be used to make the tips of the horn because I cannot get a good horn tip out of e.v.a. foam or craft foam. It's very brittle and easy to damage, and you'll make a big mess working with this stuff. Then you'll need a lot of layers of paint to give it some rigidity and cover up the holes because it's very porous. And I'll show you how to do it. It seems intimidating, but it's very easy. Next, you'll need a cheap paintbrush, preferably a stain brush, something that is very coarse. This brush is from Dollar Tree, and it's actually a higher quality than what you need. You need something like an old brush or a coarse bristle brush. Lastly, to color the horns, you'll need acrylic paint. These range from $1 to 50 cents each, and you'll need a few colors. You'll need white. I use so much white paint that I always just get the big one. I'm not sure if this is like $1 or $2. And for the most part, you'll only really need 3 colors: red, brown, and yellow. And that's for coloring the horns. You'll also need black, not for the horns, but for the helmet. And optionally, you can have other shades of red, yellow, and brown. I have them all just in case, but it's all up to you. So first, I'm gonna get the hardest part out of the way, which is the horns. And this piece where the horns go, this is e.v.a. foam, this is craft foam, and this is floral foam. So I don't quite remember how I made this piece, but there is a method to copying. You simply cover it with painter's tape, trace it, and cut it out, and you should have an accurate pattern. So this is actually 2 pieces, this top piece and this bottom piece. You can see the seam right here. So I went ahead and copied the pattern and ended up with these 2 pieces. I used tape to copy the pattern and transferred it over to cardstock. And here's my template, which I'll have in the link description below. And you only need to print 1 set, and this template will make both horn holders. Just flip it and you have the other side. Next, take your template and place it on the e.v.a. foam. You won't need a lot. This little scrap piece will be enough for all 4 pieces. Just pin it in place, and then you're going to trace it with a pen. Then flip it over and pin and trace so that you have 4 pieces in all. Now you need to cut it out, but make sure you label the pieces so you don't mix it up. So I just put a small R on one pair and a small L on the other, so I know which is my left and which is my right. And now to cut them out. And this is the trickiest part in the whole build. You have to make them all angled cuts towards the inside. Like here, you don't cut upright, but tilt your blade in and cut it at an angle towards the inside on the long sides. Not in a right angle, but at a 45-degree slant inwards. And it is very difficult even with a sharp blade, and it'll still snag, so you'll end up sawing it, and you'll end up with ugly, uneven cuts. But the cuts should all be hidden. And if you don't cut it at a slant, the horns won't fit in, and this won't sit flush against the helmet, so you'll have to make angle cuts here. So I'll get my sharpening stone and cut these out. So you'll end up with these really jagged cuts, but again, it's fine. It's just difficult, and if you mess up, you can redo it since it's just a scrap piece. Just keep your blade sharp to avoid messing up. Once you've got your pieces cut out, they should look something like this on the underside. They should have this peak in the center and should be slanted on the long sides but not the short side. Then we're going to glue the ends together and force it into a circle. So let's get the contact cement and apply some to all the short sides. And then just connect them. And you should end up with something like this. The thin one is the bottom and the thick one is the top. It looks a little crummy, but when you glue it to the helmet, you can force it into a circle, since currently the bottom piece is too weak to hold the shape, so they look like ovals. Next, you'll want to figure out where you want to place the holders. I like to align the seams of the holders with the seams of the helmet, and that ensures that they're equal in height. And as you can see, the angle we cut into them now makes a flat side to glue it flush to the helmet. And the angle we cut on the other side allows the horn to slide in. And now we're just going to glue them in place. And as you may or may not be able to see from all the glue residue, I placed the holders where I thought it would look good, but it looked terrible. So I readjusted them before the contact cement cured, and I'm happy with the results. Next, I'm going to make the top strip that goes from the eyebrow ridge all the way to the back. So you'll need a long strip the same width as this piece right here, and the end will need to be cut inward so they'll be flush after they're curved. So here you can see that I cut it at too much of an angle. It needs to be more subtle, like a 20-degree cut instead of a 45. Then place it on top and pull it all the way back and cut it where it touches the back of the ridge. And cut it at an angle towards the inside again, at just a slight angle. And make sure it's centered on the front and the back. But before you do that, we're going to score it like this. So we'll do a light scoring and then hit it with the heat gun. So I like to do a 1/2 centimeter from the edge on each side. Then connect the dots. Then just slightly score it with your blade, not too deep. We only need to go in about a 1/16 of an inch, only this much, and then we're going to open it up with a heat gun. Just a few seconds on low is enough. You should see it open up, and then it should look like that. And now you can glue it on. And since mine has this texture on the back, it'll have some gaps when you glue it on, and it won't be super flush, but that isn't a huge deal. So first, give the strip a coating on the back and also on the tips. Then let it air out a little, let it get nice and tacky. And when you apply it, just make sure you apply it straight. Since you have a seam right here, let that be your guide. And if it's a little crooked, just pull it off and try again until you're happy with the results. And if you like the way it looks and it's all dry, you can go back and add contact cement to the gaps and press it down. And then do the same for the horn holders if you have any gaps there as well. Next, we'll be making the horn segments. I don't remember how I made them the first time, so I had to remake the pattern from scratch. The first helmet I made has 6 segments, but this time I made 8, and you can use as many or as few as you'd like. It's just a repeating pattern that shrinks by 1/2 inch increments. And the template for this is also in the description below, along with the horn holder template. And you'll need 2 sets of these cut out in craft foam. So this is one horn here, and again, the color doesn't matter. Then I'll add a tiny bit of contact cement to the small edges and connect them all, basically ending up with a bunch of little foam rings. And the size difference allows you to put them one inside the other, like so, and then you simply pull them out as much as you need to create the curved horn shape. Pull them out from the flat side, pull it out more from the top than from the bottom, which gives you the downward curve. And then this seam, don't put it facing down, put it slanted forward a little so that the horn curves forward at this angle, like so. But when you're putting them inside on another, remember to place the flat side out and the curved side in. So once you have them all inside, start pulling them out. And there you go, there's the horn. And here I've got the pieces for the other horn, so I need to do it again. Then, once you're happy with the shape, draw a line so that you know how far you need to pull each one, since you'll have to take it apart to glue it all together. And do that for each segment. Take it off, glue it, and place it back where you made the mark. Once you're done, you should have 2 identically shaped horns. Then, we're going to glue them into the holders. Remember to angle them down and forward, not just down, and not just straight forward either. Now that the horns are in place, we're going to make the nose piece. It'll be a thin strip made out of craft foam that covers this seam and overlaps the top strip by about an inch or 2 and curls back under so you don't see a seam at the bottom. So here it's about 5 inches. Then I'm going to add 1.5 inches to curl into the back. So 6.5 inches by the width of the nose bridge, which is slightly under 1.25 inches on this helmet. So I'll take a scrap piece of craft foam and cut a strip 6.5 inches by 1.25 inches and cut it out. Next, I'm going to add these 2 little edges. So I'll take my strip and cut off 2 notches and add the decorative line around the edge. So here I'll measure 2 centimeters on both sides by 1 centimeter and then connect the dots. And then cut those out. Now I'll make a 0.5 centimeter line all the way around. I'll make a series of dots 0.5 centimeter from all the edges. And then connect those dots with a ruler. So it should look something like that. Then we're going to score this line very lightly. This foam is very thin, so you don't want to cut all the way through. And now we'll hit it with a heat gun, but very lightly because this foam shrinks and curls fast. So I'll be using the low setting, and as you can see, it immediately wants to curl up. But that's fine because we'll flatten it out when we glue it on. Then we'll need to figure out where we want it placed, and I want it about this high. So now we'll just contact cement it into place. Keep pressure on it, and if it keeps peeling up, just add more contact cement and that's it. Next, we'll be making the horn tips. This part is probably the most intimidating, so you'll need to get the floral foam, and this block should be enough for both horn tips. And for this part, all you need is the foam, your knife, and a pen or pencil. And this is going to get really messy, so first I'll cut the foam in half, and this will be one tip and that will be another. Then take your pen and carve out your horn tip. A pen or pencil won't really write on the foam, so you're really just carving. And I like to do a thick claw shape, and I make the base bigger than what I need so that I can shave it down. So the opening here is only about 1 1/8 inches, but here I'll make it a little bit bigger. Then we're just going to cut this out. I'm just cutting straight down outside of the line, but as close to the line as I can, just removing as many chunks as I can, and you should end up with something like this. Now we'll just whittle it out. So first I'll make it thinner and carve it out, removing the sharp edges first. Then just round it out, and you'll just repeat the process until you have it whittled down to the desired shape. As long as you draw it out first and have a decently sharp blade, you'll have no problem making this. It doesn't take prior carving experience, just your basic hand-eye coordination. Once you're happy with the results, just trace out another horn tip and repeat the process. The second one is a little more intimidating because you'll have to match the first one in shape and size, but it's still pretty easy. And if you end up not matching it exactly, you can always try again, but as long as they're close enough, it won't really matter. And remember to do a test fitting periodically to know how much more you need to shave it down, or to stop yourself from shaving it down too much. It should slide in easily but not be too loose once inside. And you don't want it to be too snug either, since it'll require a lot of paint layers, and that will add some thickness as well. So here are my 2 horn tips, and as you can see, they have created a huge mess, which you'll need to dust off before painting. Just take a clean, soft brush and brush off as much dust as you can. And as you can see, the foam is very porous, and we'll be adding a lot of paint layers to try to even out the surface and fill up the tiny holes. So to paint it, I like to stick something in the base like a skewer or a pencil and spray paint the whole thing with up to 4 layers of plasti dip. Okay, so while I wait for the tips to dry, I'll move on to the battle damage or claw marks. This part is optional and the pattern is up to you. You can put as many or as few scratches as you'd like these cliche eye cuts. And on my first helmet, I used the Dremel to make the cuts using a sanding bit, but this time I'll be using a blade and heat gun combo. So get your blade, make sure it's sharp. And first I'm gonna make a scratch going from here to here. So I'll start here, then jump down a bit and continue the cut. Now I'm gonna hit it with a heat gun, but if I hit this cut with a heat gun as is, it'll just be one fat line. So what I'll do is take the tip of the blade, turn it sideways, and widen the cut where I want it wider in a scratching motion. And when I hit it with the heat gun, this part should open up more than the tip, creating a realistic looking claw mark. And it should look something like that, which isn't super impressive until you apply some heat. After about 4 seconds on low heat, it should open up, and as you can see, we left the points sharp and the middle areas fatter, giving us a more realistic cut. From here, you can scratch it further to make it fatter. Just be careful, because the foam will only take so much heat before it starts to burn. And I'm happy with this method. In my opinion, it's actually better than the Dremel method I used last year, because oftentimes I'd lose control of the Dremel and it made unintentional scratches, and this way is much easier to control and it makes for cleaner cuts. So now I'm going to make the cuts and scratch out all the cuts and heat it all up at once. And here it is. I'm super happy with how this turned out. Just keep in mind they should be random and natural looking, but if you mess up, just chalk it up to battle damage. Now let's get a look at our horn tips. So this is what they look like after 3 super heavy coats of plasti dip. The paint wasn't able to remove all the texture, but it removed enough, filling out a lot of the dimples and pits in the foam, but also made it a lot more durable since floral foam is super fragile. But after 3 heavy coats, they have this rubbery protective layer and are ready to be glued in place. Get out your contact cement and coat the base with a thick layer. The contact cement also makes it slippery and easier to fit into place. Just make sure you align the inner curve of the tip with the bottom seam of the horn. And it doesn't really matter how deep you slide the horn in. You can have it far out or shorter, as long as you do the same on the other side. And now the other side. A nice heavy coat of glue, and try to match the first side. Try to do them back to back so that you have more time to adjust the tips before the glue dries. But if you need more time, just add a bit more contact cement and it'll give you more time to adjust. But I'm happy with how this looks, so I'm going to add the thumbtacks now. So the way I like to do this is just add 4 evenly spaced tacks on the brow ridge on each side. And they shouldn't be able to poke all the way through and poke your head, since this should be the thickest part of the helmet. Just push them in all the way, and they don't need to be glued, but if you want to, you can always add a touch of glue, but they won't need it. The foam and the paint will hold it all in place. You can measure them out for a more even spacing, but I just like to freehand it. You can add more, and you can make them go all the way around, but I prefer it only above the eyes. So now the helmet is all done except for the paint. And here you go. Sorry I didn't show the painting process. I'm super lazy about moving my camera once I have it set up, but this is what the helmet looks like after 2 good coats of dark gray plasti dip. And it looks a bit on the dark side, but that's how it should look. And certain areas you can see where the paint didn't reach, but that's okay because that gets its own painting step. So now we're going to add the shine. This is my favorite part because it really makes it pop and come together. And some people just spray metal spray paint on directly, but that looks horrible. Please do not ruin your helmet by spraying it directly. It looks terrible. No matter your technique, it will look terrible. So get your brush, and like I said, get a cheap one that has these really coarse bristles. This is a staining brush and it's about 60 cents from Walmart. So essentially I'm just going to use the spray paint and use it as if it were regular paint and just brush it on. So get your metallic silver spray paint, give it a good shake, and I actually like to use the cap as a cup to hold the paint. So just spray into the cap, get it all liquidy, and dab your brush in there. and brush it on lightly in a back and forth motion. You gotta do this part quick because the spray paint dries up super fast. And the more you do this, the more paint will dry on your brush, making it more and more coarse, which actually gives you a better result. And just repeat the process. Like I said, the paint dries up very fast. So once you dab your brush in, try to focus on one section at a time. Brush the paint on back and forth from all angles, give it a more random look. It may look crummy at first, but the more you add, the more it comes together. Also, I suggest you do this part outside if you can. As you can see, my laziness over not wanting to move my camera led me to ruin my work table. But it's okay, I knew the risks. Once you're done, there might be some areas you're not happy with, some areas where you think the shine is on too strong, but that's okay because the next step is to reduce the brightness. So for the next step, get a tiny cup or container and some black acrylic paint. Add a tiny bit of paint and add some water, about a 50-50 ratio, and mix it together. Take a small brush and you'll want to paint it into the crevices, like the scratches, the seams, and basically all the nooks and crannies. Just add the paint to the core of it. Then take some toilet paper and wipe it off outwardly, leaving some paint in the core and a tiny bit smeared out around it, almost like an eyelash look. You could also apply it with just the toilet paper. Apply it like so, then take the dry-ish side and wipe it off. And it gives it a bit of a worn and weathered look that adds a bit of realism. So I'm going to go ahead and paint all the crevices and wipe it off. Try to wipe off within 10 seconds of painting it, otherwise wiping it will do nothing and it'll be too dark. And I especially want to get these deep cuts because the coats of Plastidip weren't able to get deep in here and the blue from the foam is showing through. You could use a less watery mixture of paint, or you can even apply it spread out with a brush like this. Just go crazy, experiment, see what works best for you. My method isn't necessarily the best way, it's just the way I prefer. And worst case scenario, if it ends up drying too dark, just get a little bit of toilet paper, dip it in water, and wipe it off. And you might not be able to see some of the details of what I'm currently doing on camera or even in person since it's so subtle, but it really does add a bit of realism having shadows as well as highlights. Okay, now we're close to done. Next, we're gonna paint the horns. So I wanted to recreate this color. This is like a dark beige or a light brown, but I wasn't able to recreate it, and that's okay. As long as you're happy with the color and it works for you, that's fine. This one is 1 part brown, 5 parts white, and about 10 parts yellow. I probably shouldn't have added so much yellow, but it's still within the ballpark of natural horn color. So now I'm gonna paint the entire horn, and for all the strokes, make sure you start from the base and go outwards towards the tip. The strokes give it a more realistic horn look since it's the natural grain horns have because of the way they grow out from the skull. Also keep in mind, white and yellow acrylic need a lot of layers to fully cover up dark parts, so make a big enough batch of your paint to get the job done in 2 to 3 coats, which should be about ½ an ounce. The good thing about acrylic though is that it dries super fast, so give each side a light coat, then move on to the next side, and by the time you're done with the second side, the first side should be ready for its second coat. So here it is after 3 coats. The final coat, I actually darkened up my paint batch with a drop of red. Next, the aging on the horns. So for the paint, I mixed 3 parts brown, 1 part red, 2 parts yellow, and 2 parts water. And we'll basically apply it the same way we did the helmet aging. Just paint the base of each horn segment, then do 1 or 2 segments at a time. Paint the base all the way around, and take some toilet paper and wipe it off towards the tip of the horn, which gives us this cool aged look. And if it's too dark for your liking, just add a bit of water to the toilet paper and wipe more off. Then repeat the process on every segment, and once you finish on one horn, move on to the other side. The paint should dry within 1 to 2 minutes, which makes this step pretty fast. And that's it. The final step is to give it 1 or 2 coats of clear paint. The coats will protect all of the acrylic paint, so don't skip out on this step. Plus, it gives it all a nice sheen. Also, I added these strips on the inside because the helmet came out too big for my son, but these strips make up the difference and it fits just fine. So you don't have to scrap your helmet if it came out slightly too big. And here is the final product. I'm super happy with the results, and my son had a blast. Sorry this second video took so long to make. We bought a house, and the moving process was hectic, and my project list quadrupled, and my YouTube channel became the lowest of my priorities. But I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. It took so long to finish, even though the helmet only took about a week to make. Again, sorry for the delay, and thank you for watching.